Hey there guys, this week in our Spotlight we're going to take a look at a set of games from a player with this screen name MerfolkGod. Now in last week's article we talked about mono BluePost and mono blue control and all the different variations that you can have, including Delver. And it was something that was really popular actually last week. There were a couple of other great articles that came out around the same time that also talked about mono BluePost. And it's really not necessarily a new thing to Pauper, but it is something that has gained a little bit of ground. It has kind of established itself pretty well as yet another variant of mono blue control. So I thought it would be a great idea to focus out a set of games in this event in our Spotlight for the week and take a look at how a mono BluePost deck has performed. Now, this is going to be a showing where he ended up going 3-1 overall, which is great. And the first game we're going to look at here is going to be from the first round. It was a tough fought match, ended up going 1-2. Losing out to Turbo Kitty 3000 in a very interesting matchup against Is It Post. Now this would be the only game that he lost, the only round that he dropped, and he would go on to finish for that 3-1, like I said, and end up in the money, which is great. So we're going to take a look at, I think we can get a lot of great information from how this matchup goes. It also shows us a lot of great aspects when you're considering the post matchup. It's one of these things where there are several variations of post out there currently. The popular ones being, of course, Demir, Mono Blue, and Is It Post. But even though these are different variations, there's sometimes a similar approach in how you have to deal with the fact that your opponent is going to be ramping up your mana and vice versa. So let's take a look at how these games went. Okay, so we're going to step into the first game here. We do see that Turbo Kitty, who is, again, our Is It Post player, is going to get the first go. Gets down that awesome first turn Cloud Post. This is a really nice play. I love to get that going. It gives you that opportunity to untap it as soon as possible. One of the things that most post decks are missing is a turn 1 play. It is not necessary. They're definitely a mid to late game deck. So if you can get that in and untapped as soon as possible, you can really start building up that heavy mana base. It's very exciting to me personally whenever I can get a Cloud Post in on turn 1, because I feel pretty good about getting that mana ramped pretty fast. Starts down with a mountain. It's usually a slower play for Is It Post. They usually want, obviously, the blue mana ahead of the red mana. Merfolk is still not hitting a post yet. Second Cloud Post does come down for Turbo Kitty, going to accelerate here into a Prism, but will meet a mana leak with the MerfolkGod. And this is something that is not usually run. We talked about a couple of lists. One of the more popular ones is variations of New Plan's deck. He is one of the most successful, maybe most consistent, most frequent seen, however you want to approach that. He is one of the big names when it comes to BluePost. He has been a successful mono blue control player for a long time now, at the very least. So mana leak is something that is not necessarily easily seen in this deck. It's almost unnecessary. It works better, I think, personally, in decks like Demir Post and Is It Post, where that colorless mana comes into a bit more play. Definitely a useless card kind of in this matchup, because your opponent is going to be able to generate a lot of extra mana off those Cloud Posts, and it'll be easier to find that 3. Either way, it is a counter spell, and it does keep him off a card draw on the Prism. It does most importantly keep him off the blue mana. You see, he puts down another mountain, and he is still without blue mana. So that was a really critical counter spell on that first Prophetic Prism. Something that you may have looked at first. I know I did, and said, okay, countering that may not be the best play. However, he definitely made the right call here. MerfolkGod did, with countering that and keeping his opponent out of blue. So finally, here we are on turn 4, gets down his own Cloud Post. Now he has, at this point in time, accelerated his opponent, so each of these are tapping for 3. He's got 6 mana now available there, but on his next turn, he's finally going to be able to himself get that open mana. Another mountain comes down. Definitely not a good start here for Turbo Kitty. I feel like I'm going to stumble over that one several times, but getting that, the third mountain and no blue mana is definitely going to hold him back big time. Glimmer Post is going to come down, accelerate his life a bit, and he is going to start out with a Muldrifter. Really a great draw engine that this deck can put together here with the Muldrifters and the accumulated knowledges. Glimmer Post comes down on his opponent's side. It's something you like to see. Still not hitting that blue mana. Definitely puts MerfolkGod in a pretty good position. More Cloud Posts coming down. You see now at this point in time, each Cloud Post on the field is going to be tapping for 6 mana each, which is pretty awesome. There's a lot of great things that the Mono Blue deck can do with the extra mana that most, say, Is It Posts cannot do. Things with the recursion of the walls with the Ghostly Flicker. You can really get a broken combo out of that. Here is the first wall we see on Merfolk's side. Going to use that here to return the Mana Leak. Definitely a good call there. The Accumulated Knowledge is a great card. As you approach the second, it's okay. As you approach the third, it's really good. And as you approach the fourth and final copy of Accumulated Knowledge, it's great. You're paying 2 to draw 4. However, this first one is mediocre to not good. It's only drawing 1 card. Leaving that in your graveyard is really a great thing. I often find, especially against things like mono black control where you have the discard, it's something I'm more than happy to throw away. So Electrostatic Bolt comes down, not too surprising. You figure that Turbo Kitty does get a little bit of red kill in this deck with Lightning Bolts, Flame Slash, stuff like that. So he's going to take the opportunity to kill off the Muldrifters and stuff when he has that chance. The Seagate Oracle and the Mnemonic Wall are some things that occasionally will be out of range. You know, there are a lot of decks that are doing like Turbo Kitty is here and running the Electrostatic Bolt and these kind of shock spells as opposed to the higher damage off of the Flame Slash and the Lightning Bolts. So it's definitely something that's going to keep these alive. It's going to keep them around and gives blue the mono blue deck a little bit of an edge here. So Turbo Kitty throws out a Preordain. I am going to hope and assume that he was trying to just draw out the counterspell. He did know that Mana Leak had been recurred off the Mnemonic Wall. He did hit that island though finally. We are, what turn is it? Turn 7 and finally hit his first island. That's definitely not something you want to see, but he does at least find it. These games are both going to come into a mid to late, so it's really still kind of early game at turn 7. Merfolk is going to be looking for his end games in stuff like the Crusher, and you see it right now, it comes down. And Kitty is still going to be stacking up his mana and hoping to find a Torch or Thunder, whatever he is running. Another Oracle comes down. Turbo Kitty probably does the appropriate move here and scoops. Having the 1 blue mana is, you know, it's great he finally found it, but having just 1 is going to definitely put him at a disadvantage. And this was a big win off of that first counterspell on Prophetic Prison. Really, really worked in Merfolk's favor. I think it was a good play, but it actually worked out even better because of a bit of a bad draw there by Kitty. So we're going to step into the second game here. Let's see if we can't get this going. Now, sideboard options here are very interesting because when you look at the Is It Post decks, a lot of them are running the Stone Rains. They are running Land Destruction. I am blanking on the flashback one. I want to say Earth Rift, but I could be wrong. Anyways, they do run the Land Destruction, and it's this very interesting thing, and I think that's part of the reason I wanted to showcase this match, is because the matchup between, you know, I'm going to say a mirror, and this is going to include, you know, any of the post decks out there. It's essentially a mirror because you have to be able to attack the land base at a certain point in time and keep it at the same time. There are these odd situations where you really want to keep your opponent off of Cloud Posts, but you want to say, you know, keep these Glimmer Posts alive so that you can get more mana off of your own Cloud Posts. It's a very interesting situation, and there are times where you may have land destruction in your hand but not want to play it actually because you need that extra land. You need that second Cloud Post that is on the field, or the extra locust that your opponent is playing. So it's definitely a very interesting approach. You have to be very smart about what your hand is. You have to be very smart about what your opponent's plays are and what variation of post he is running. It's going to differ very it's going to be very different, sorry about that, between all of the different versions. Now, when you look at the mono blue post, a lot of them are without any kind of land destruction option. They occasionally will run Spreading Seas, but that is not a great card. If you look at, you know, of course, red and black and green, they all have very good options for destroying lands. Blue, of course, does not have anything, and neither does white. So if they do run Spreading Seas, it's a mediocre card. It's a cantrip, and it does keep them off Cloud Posts, but most of the times you will see Blue Post not running any kind of land destruction. That means that a lot of the options for sideboards mainly come down to things like Dispel, maybe bringing in an extra deep analysis if he is running something like that, a little extra draw to get around some counter spells. That's basically going to be the ideal thing there. There are a lot of options in the sideboard that are going to be completely useless. Like I said, the best option for land destruction to mono blue is Spreading Seas, and even that is a weak option. So Kitty's trying to decide what to do, and here is going to do an interesting approach with Stone Rain, and this is kind of what I was talking about as well. When you are running these Stone Rains and the land destruction in a mirror with another post deck, this is one of these times where he is probably thinking that, hey, it's still early game, I want to be able to accelerate my land here, so I'm going to keep my opponent's Cloud Post in play, and it's probably a better option to destroy this. I think actually this is a weaker play than if this was a mirror match against, Izzet Post and Izzet Post. When it comes to things like Izzet and Dimir, they're running 2 colors, and of course it's going to be harder for them to find the second color. When you're running mono BluePost, this is going to simply slow down the land base. The odds of putting them off colors are lower than it is if you are playing a 2-color version. So in comes the Pyroblasts. Tries to save his island there with a Condescend. The Pyroblast is going to keep that off, going to get rid of that island. And now Merfolk God is going to have to hopefully find another island. A lot of the mono blue posts do not run Prophetic Prism, so they are unable to siphon that extra colorless mana. And we'll just have to see what he comes into. And he does have an island. Unfortunately, we can't get a look at the hands. It would be great if there was some kind of spectator mode where you could see what the player's hands were. But he does get the island there. He does, like I said, he is being held off mana a little bit. He does find his color that he needed. He's not going to be able to siphon it through a prism, but because his opponent is running these posts as well, it's not so bad to be stuck at 2 lands as long as one of them is Cloud Post. He does obviously want more than just 1 colored mana available to him, but he can still make his big plays on things like the Muldrifters and the walls because he is now ramping up. He can tap this Cloud Post for 4 mana. So it's not so, if you look at most other decks and if they only have 2 lands, they're going to be sitting there crying and complaining over land screw. But because he does have that Cloud Post, he's able to get around it. As long as he has 1 colored land, he can get his cards into play. Puts down another Glimmer Post, getting himself into a situation where he is well above 20, and Muldrifter comes down. And this is what I was talking about. He's only sitting at 3 lands, but he's able to easily play that Muldrifter because these Cloud Posts now tap for 5. So passing along here, island comes down. Another, I find it very interesting. Turbo has found himself in several situations. You saw last game where he was stuck with mountains for a majority of the game. Here he is just finding an island on turn 5. Luckily for him, he did get the prism into play, but I would be curious to see what his split is on islands versus mountains, or if he's just having a bad draw. Getting his own Muldrifter down, which is great. Ah, yes, Earth Rift. Okay, good. Glad to know I was right about that one. And this is a situation now where he has decided that the Cloud Post is the better target. I think this is definitely the right play. There are enough Glimmer Posts on the field and Cloud Posts on his own side of the board that he can generate enough mana. And because his opponent is stuck to 3 lands, getting rid of that Cloud Post is getting him out of this. I was just talking a second ago about having that Cloud Post made it, better. It was not so much worrying about the mana screw ability because he was, able to tap that 1 land for 5 mana. Getting that Cloud Post off the board means that he is now down to 2. So you went from 7 to 2 with a single destruction spell. And Turbo Kitty is going to be sitting pretty well. He can still tap his own Cloud Posts for 4 each. Those 2 would equate to a Crusher, which would be devastating, of course. So things are going to be very tough here for Merfolk. Luckily does hit a land drop. He's not terribly far behind when it comes to lands. It is only turn 6 now for Turbo Kitty and approaching turn 6 for Merfolk. 3 lands on turn 6 is pretty bad. You consider 1 got destroyed. I'm sorry, 2 got destroyed. So he was hitting 5 on 6, so he only missed 1 turn with a land drop. Not terrible. Ghostly Flicker is going to come down. He's going to attempt to flicker out the Muldrifter after blocking, and the Glimmer Post to gain a little extra life here. Fortunately, does meet with a Pyroblast, and this is something, usually Blue Posts are running about 2 copies of that. They can easily throw 1 away. It's kind of ideal to get that into the graveyard early on so you can get that recursion going with the walls. It has to, of course, be in your graveyard to get that return the first time and get that combo going. You need to have that combination between the wall in play and the Ghostly Flicker in hand to really make that work. So that gets countered. The Muldrifters do trade, and Merfolk luckily hits yet another land drop. Still not a Cloud Post, going to put him a little bit behind. He is going to be unable still to put out some of the bigger spells, the walls and whatnot. But luckily he's building up a colored mana base. This is very important, like I said, because they do not run a lot of prisms, if any. I think most lists do not run the prisms at all. I almost feel like it almost needs it. There are a couple lists that are starting to run the prisms, and I almost feel it is definitely a necessity to siphon out that extra cloud post. So flashing back Earth Rift here in an attempt to get rid of the Glimmer Post. He has 4 of his own Locust lands in play, so he really does not have I'm sorry. It is really not necessary to have any of his opponent's lands in play. It still may have been something that I would want to save for a Cloud Post. It does hold Merfolk back to 3, and Mono BluePost does need the extra lands to really get some of the big spells into play, the walls and the Muldrifters and whatnot. So, putting him off land is great. I think still there are times where the Cloud Posts are a better target. Ooh, another Stone Rain, damn. Just really, really brutal. He is going to be really hard pressed here to get this game back in hand if he cannot get past all of this land destruction. So that's going to be successful. He returns Prophetic Prism, an interesting choice because it is going to allow his opponent to redraw a card off of that play. I guess he might have been doing it just for the draw. Not really sure, but anyways, it's going to pass along. No land drop here from Merfolk God. Not good. He is going to be stuck at 2, and this is probably going to be game in itself. Still, you look at these, and it's very interesting because it is still 25 to 23. We are now in turn 9, it looks like. And they are going to be really, really slow going here because the win condition for Merfolk is most of the time going to be Crusher, and he is well behind when it comes to getting that into play. Kitty is going to be digging, of course, for a burn spell, and this is going to keep going at kind of a very snail's pace and before it even drops below 20 for any opponent. Oracles are coming down, giving the Turbo Kitty, the Izzet player, to be... the opportunity to be searching for that burn spell that he needs, and it looks like he is bringing an Earth Rift to finish him off. Going to, of course, be able to flash that back next turn to get rid of the second land in play, and it was definitely a good call for Merfolk. Don't waste any more time off the clock and just get that going. So they're going to go into a third game here. They are now split 1-1. And things are not looking so terrible. He had a really strong game 1. Game 2, the land destruction just really killed him. And it's very interesting because it seems that Turbo Kitty, we've saw at least 4 land destruction spells there, 2 Stone Rains and 2 Earth Rifts. Very interesting group. Most of the time you will see there are a lot of Izzet lists that try and go standard with a 4 group of Earth Rift. So I'd be very curious to see what breakdown Turbo Kitty is running. If he was running more than 4 land destruction spells, which would be quite interesting. That actually may not be such a bad thing. There are a lot of post decks out there currently. We are in that point where as you can see, the total population for all of these events has started to jump up significantly. So, of course, with the more people playing, the more Izzet Post decks you will find. Izzet Post is one of the most popular decks, even if it is not the most consistent when it comes to showings every week. It is something you will see post hands down at least 1 or 2, I guarantee you, in your 4 matches. It is almost like a plague. And I think it brings up, of course, banning discussions that it's played so much, but the fact that it is not very successful when it's played, kind of balance things out. Sure, it is always in the top 3, but you would expect probably more showings. I think we only get it in the top 3 because there is such a significant number of people playing variations of it. When it comes down to Dimir Post, Izzet Post, there's BluePost now. We had a couple junk posts in this event, and it's just something that people love to play. You can't go wrong with a whole pile of mana. So game starting off here, both players getting a quick start. I'm sorry about that little side rant. I'm trying not to go too far down that road and ban and restricted list. But games are starting out fast. Both players getting cloud posts in really good. Another interesting start on Turbo Kitty. He does get a prism down, which is good for him, but he is starting on red mana once again. Not a great thing to be seeing, but we are getting a lot of mana, and a lot of early games can be a lot of early game being done here. Oy, talking, not my friend. Guildgate coming down, gonna get a little damage off this Oracle, swing for a couple turns here, it would seem. End of turn, tapping out here. He is going to start the capsize on the buyback, trying to get rid of that cloud post, but does meet a pyroblast. Thankfully going to keep him in land. more Cloud Posts coming down. Now tapping out, obviously, for the Muldrifter. Going to meet another Pyroblast. Oh, what a draw from Turbo Kitty. Definitely an unfortunate thing. I think it's almost a really good matchup for Is It Post because of the fact that it does have so many sideboard options. They do often run the Pyroblasts for the Delver matchup, most importantly, and they do run the Land Destruction for the Mirror. And those two things, I think, really are going to give him the edge in this match. More mountains coming down. Not a lot going on in the early game, as always. Here we are in turn 5. Drawing some cards off accumulated knowledge. That is the first one, so he's going to draw a single one. Taps out to attempt to play Crusher. It looks like it's going to be countered. Yep, right off the bat. There's no hesitation there. That cannot hit the field. So, Stone Rain looks like our first land destruction, attempting to hit this untapped Cloud Post. And he is going to, in response, attempt to Ghostly Flicker. This will save his Cloud Post. It will also give him a draw off the Oracle, but it looks like the Turbo Kitty does have an answer for that. Yep, and Mana Leak does come down. Oh, interesting choice here, because he still has 3 lands, Oh, very interesting. So, Stone Rain came down, targeting Cloud Post. In response, tapped out to Ghostly Flicker the Oracle and the Cloud Post to save the Cloud Post, and had a 3 remaining mana here, and instead of using that mana to stop the Mana Leak, he decided to let it counter and let it destroy his land. Alright. The only thing I can guess is that he assumed there was a... there's no reason to not have paid that 3. I really... Feel free to prove me wrong, but I cannot think of a reason not to pay the 3. He is tapped out on blue mana, so Turbo Kitty would not be able to do anything else. The Prism was tapped and his only blue source in play, so he wouldn't be able to throw a second counter at that. Very interesting. It's again a situation, we were talking about the mirror matchup between 2 post decks where the land destruction is a pretty good thing. You can still take that chance to keep your opponent away from mana, while at the same time you still have Cloud Posts that are going to tap for 4 each. Keeping the mana reined in, I guess, is the best way to put it there. So, Oracle swinging through, Glimmer Post coming down, gain some life. Putting down a Prism gives him more blue mana sources, something he's definitely been lacking. And here comes a second Stone Rain, and that's going to simply destroy. Only 2 cards in hand for Merfolk, definitely not a good place to be. One of the things that BluePost does have the ability to do once it gets underway is rebuild its hand through the Muldrifters and the accumulated knowledge, things like Deep Analysis, the Oracles. It really gives you a lot of opportunities to build up your hand. So if you find yourself in a situation where you only have 2 cards in hand, it's definitely a disadvantage. Attempting to put out Mnemonic Wall here, this is great. He does have the Ghostly Flicker there. He's going to get it returned with 3 untapped mana available to use that. It's going to start the combo here. You can use it. Probably the best options for him at this current point in time will be the Wall and the Oracle. Luckily, another wall coming down here. A lot of the times in the late game, what you want to look for is things like the Glimmer Post to be bouncing with that Muldrifters. Those are going to be some of your more ideal targets other than Oracles. So Wall's going to come down. It's going to return a Pyroblast, which is very unfortunate because red mana is something that Turbo Kitty has no problem finding. So Merfolk God can, if he wanted to at the end of turn here, tap out and attempt to Ghostly Flicker things, but he knows that his opponent is sitting on one of those 3 cards as a Pyroblast, which will just simply counter that. Needs to find a little backup for it of his own. Glimmer Post coming down, puts him back up to 25. This is where we get to that long point. Oh, 3rd Stone Rain. So there you go. I think we are looking at least 5 land destruction cards brought in by Turbo Kitty. Very interesting. I think that's usually pretty heavy for what you would see in most sideboards for Is It Post. Another interesting choice from Merfolk God, attempting to force spike the Stone Rain, obviously going to be paid off. And that land will get destroyed. Attempting to, once again, Ghostly Flicker in response, though he knows his opponent does have this Pyroblast, which is going to counterspell that. and just destroy his Cloud Post. This is definitely putting the game in Turbo Kitty's hands. He still has Cloud Post obviously available to himself, which will tap for that big mana. He managed to get 3 land destruction spells currently to destroy the 3 Cloud Posts that Merfolk had. Definitely a bad situation. So end of turn, Merfolk looks like he's going to use Echoing Decay to return that to his hand and replay the Oracle, trying to find something. Kind of a, Echoing Decay is oftentimes a 1 or 2 of in the BluePost deck. It kind of says something about this matchup because there are not a lot of sideboard options for the mirror. I was talking about how the option for land destruction is going to be Spreading Seas, and that is not something you see very often. There is not a lot of spells that the deck can bring in for the mirror matchup. It's definitely poised better to beat some of the other matchups, things like, aggro decks, the combos off of Storm and Infect and whatnot. And that is a much better matchup for him. So attempting to Oracle does get counterspelled, but he wishes he had that earlier. So passing it along, still trying to find some draw. You see Merfolk is still down to 2 cards in hand. Definitely, oh good, Muldrifter, going to start rebuilding that hand. Like I said, that's one of the biggest problems this deck is going to have, is if it does not maintain a hand, it's going to be at a significant disadvantage. He is now up to 3, and if he can just find some land, maybe he can reestablish himself in this game. Another Muldrifter comes down on the opponent's side this time, and Seagate Oracle is going to allow Turbo Kitty to really build up his hand and find the cards he needs. Prism allowing yet more card draw. And it looks like, we don't know what he's building at here. There you go. Mystical Teachings finds another Pyroblast. That is an unfortunate thing. I would definitely say, we saw that first game and Merfolk had a really good advantage, and then come game 2 and 3 did not really build up very well. Sideboarding was not so great. Does look like he did bring in Spreading Seas, so he was running 4 Spreading Seas in his sideboard, I am guessing, and does manage to get off a Cloud Post, but unfortunately did not find any really in this game or the previous one. And I am a little surprised that Pyroblast did not come in at that point in time. Flashing back a Teachings to find yet another Teachings. Swinging for 2. You see, we are at turn 13 here, and like I said, these games really can draw out. This is still above 20 life for each of them. There you go, uses that Pyroblast finally to get rid of that Muldrifter. Probably a good move there, like I said, keeping your opponent off of lands, keeping the blue deck without cards in hand whenever possible. Searches out now a Capsize with the Mystical Teachings. Definitely going to look to finish this game some point soon. So returns his wall and is going to bounce a Pyroblast once again. That's going to be pretty much, I think, the game breaker in this matchup is the fact that these Pyroblasts for Turbo Kitty have come in so well. He's managed to find a lot of great targets for him, and they've really kept Merfolk God out of this. The land destruction, of course, is destroying his mana base, keeping him off of these big plays, these multiple plays in a turn, but those Pyroblasts are really, really holding him down and making the counter magic strong. So Teachings, finding Prohibit, more counter magic to back himself up here, drawing more cards, still looking for that finisher. Swinging over. Oh, look, we're finally below 20 damage. Isn't it exciting? 4th Prism coming down, drawing yet more cards. This game has been over for a while now, pretty much, when you can't get these Cloud Posts in play. You've lost 3 Cloud Posts. You only have 1 more in deck, and granted, you're going to get a little extra Locust count because of your opponent, but that really screws up your mana base, and it really is going to put you in a bad position here. No way to get those back. So Force Spike on Lightning Bolt, of course, is going to be paid off. Mana Leak is going to be paid off as well. And Condescend for 0. Just going to take the Scry off of that because he is unable to. He could pay 3 there, but his opponent had 4 available to him. So it would not have countered anyways. Swing through with more Muldrifters. Capsize coming down. he's going to start recurring this wall. The Capsize works really well. The Ghostly Flicker is, obviously the best and most fun combo, I have to say, when it comes to the wall, but the Capsize is going to work just as well to get that back and allow him to abuse the return ability. We're going to have to speed things up here because these games really just draw out, and it looks like he does finally have the finisher. Yep. Here comes the Rolling Thunder for 16, attempting to Mana Leak, plenty of mana available, Pyroblast, Hydroblast on the Pyro, and this is, oh man, talk about timing. You got Turbo Kitty is now down to 6 seconds, and Pyroblast is going to come in yet again. Still 2 mana available. He has a Prohibit in hand. Really built up quite the counter base, and a great effort there by Merfolk to not only stay in this game, but time out his opponent. Oh man, what a heartbreaker. What a heartbreaker. He had counter spills built up, managed to draw into some to try and get this Thunder out, try and stall out his opponent for the last 2 seconds. You see this, there is 2 seconds on this clock, and nothing that Merfolk can do. So that's going to be the end of this game. What a heartbreaker. It really is. I cannot even imagine. I would be on full tilt after that. Oh, man. So there you go. It was a tight matchup between Merfolk God playing BluePost and Turbo Kitty 3000 with Izzet Post. Now, Merfolk God does lose that round, but he will go on to go 3-0 in the remaining 3 rounds. He played Burn in round 2. He managed to beat Delver in round 3, and then Storm in round 4 to end up in the money. A really great showing. I think that is a great example of how BluePost can be played through. I didn't get a chance, I was sick last week, to really showcase the deck, but if you go back and look at the article, there are a couple links there to some of my fellow writers and whatnot who have talked about BluePost and show you a great interaction about those. It is a very strong deck, a very good contender for mono blue control, and it is something that you will see a little bit more of these days, I do believe. Some downsides to it, but I think it's a very strong blue control deck. You can't go wrong when you're generating that much mana. There's always some big play to make. So hope you guys enjoyed it. A little bit of a different spotlight format on the matches, but we will just kind of do these as we go, and hopefully you enjoy them.